This message is being broadcast by the Department of Defense of the Republic.
Because this whole idea of democracy in this country, it's retarded anyway. It's never been a democracy. That's just, democracy is the bedtime story they tell the subjects. Oh, you were mad back in the days of kings and queens or whatever because you thought you didn't have any power. You have power now. Obviously, no matter who you elect, you never get what you want somehow, but you still have power, I guess, somehow. I don't know how.
It's April 2025. Now, 2 videos ago, I had mentioned corporations and how, for example, corporations are psyopting everyone, for example, through marketing. And people are being bombarded by this constantly. Now, I've also mentioned how the people who run these corporations have very much influence over, for example, political structures, we'll say, as a descriptive. But I would like to kind of focus on something that everyone everywhere is experiencing with corporations. I did address this in some recent videos as well. The quality and quantity of products and services going downhill, generally speaking. Now, one thing with a corporation, what many people may not know, and before I continue, I'm going to be very brief, extremely brief with any historical references or definitions or anything like that, because many people may not grasp anything more complicated. So I'm going to really simplify everything here. What people don't know, perhaps most people don't know, corporations have the status of a living human being. And this came about when there was a case, and it was argued using the laws that freed the slaves in the United States, how corporations are living entities, but they're a fictional entity. Now I'm going to segue for a quick moment here. We hear a lot of talk with these free men on the land and truthers and freedom fighters and everything else, how your name is a legal fiction. And I tie this in with Jordan Maxwell's efforts that spans decades, and now it's just being accepted as some sort of nonsensical fact. Anyway, I digress. Corporations are legal fictions. And these legal fictions became or have the status of a living human being through the laws that freed slaves. Originally, corporations was supposed to be, as a descriptive, a bridge to gap between individuals wanting to do work for a government, for example, infrastructure, building a bridge or something like that. And the corporate entity, or the corporation at the time, wasn't even an entity, had as a descriptive, limited lifespan. It wasn't supposed to be indefinite. But it kind of grew into the monster that it is today. And the whole idea with corporations is to protect the people who start up a business, and it involves taxes, lawsuits, all sorts of stuff. It protects these individuals. Now, there are ways to breach the corporate veil. This is the corporate veil. I think there's 7 different ways to breach the corporate veil. For example, fraud, criminal activities, things like that can breach that to go after the people, the individuals who are actually running a corporation. Now, something else a lot of people may not realize is that everything in today's world is a corporation. Everything. Countries, states, provinces, municipalities, everything is a corporation. I'm not going to get into how that evolved or anything else, but just wanted to highlight that for those who don't know. Now, I'm just going to somewhat segue off on a tangent here for a moment. The corporate veil protects people in the corporations. Now, over time, I've mentioned, for example, something called qualified immunity. And that is basically where government officials, say police, are protected, etc. Now, that really stems from the United States. Now, Canada itself doesn't have the same type of qualified immunity, say, as the United States. But Canada has something somewhat similar. For example, the primary reliance is on the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and adhering to that. But we see problems with this system that we have here in Canada because things are very easily circumvented or even ignored. In my case that I've highlighted for many years clearly shows that even case law could be just ignored, dismissed. Other case law can be introduced and completely using mental gymnastics be used to, and it's a real mess. I digress. What I really want to focus on here is not so much everything being a corporation. I've already just talked about how corporations are psyopting people, corporate veils, and qualified immunity, or Canada's version of a qualified immunity and everything else. What I want to really focus on here are corporations themselves. In today's world, corporations are bound to their, for example, shareholders. Profits are more important, and people getting paid, the shareholders, more important than, for example, quality or quantity of services. And this is where this all impacts everyone today. You go to, whether it be a restaurant or to the store, buy groceries, anything, or even things like building a house to automotive, everything is impacted by this. The shareholders are priority. Profits are priority. At one time, when someone opened up a business, they took pride to give people quality, perhaps even quantity, of their product or services. But that's long gone. People who run businesses, as a general descriptive here, are more concerned with profits. How much can they bring in? Especially when you get to the corporate level, and especially when you get into shareholders and everything else, they become the priority. And it's very sad because the commoner suffers for it. However, the commoner is not a complete innocent victim in all this, because the commoner has allowed things to progress to where we are today. Now, people are going to say, well, no, that's not true. Yeah, it's very true. In fact, you can even tie it into them making civilization worse. Now, yes, you could say, well, if everyone got together and say they boycotted something or whatever, then yeah, it could have impact. And we see this, especially the past, say, 5 years, where corporations make some really stupid decisions on marketing, and they might use, say, something that's controversial or whatever, say something stupid, whatever. We even see this with Hollywood movies recently. All I'm going to say is Snow White, where somebody has said something really stupid, acted really stupid, and even goes to a stupid script and everything else, and they lost a lot of money. But the problem is, most people will not get aboard, will not do anything. This is just the way it is. And many people, out of the most, just say, yeah, this is it. They support how everything goes along. But when we see goods and services no longer being fueled, as a descriptive, by having good quality or good quantity, the profits, then everyone suffers. Now, how does this tie into what I started talking about in the beginning, about how everything in today's world is a corporation? Start putting the pieces together yourself. The quality of life overall. We can even, dare I say, use the medical profession. You can link that however you want, using whatever events that you deem fit. But we see how the quality of life overall has been impacted because of the current corporate structure and the focus of corporations today. Now, there's a movie, and I've highlighted this movie in overlays probably for the past almost 10 years, called Idiocracy. And it was a comedy. And part of that movie had to do with corporations completely running everything. There's advertising and on everything, even toilet paper, for example. I can't remember, but that was the whole idea. The other part was how, for example, the lesser of the human gene pool, we'll say, became the majority. I want to stop here for a second. I highlighted in an overlay, for example, there was an experiment with a baby monkey and a baby human, how they were trying to elevate the baby monkey to perform mentally and physically as a baby human. It didn't happen, but the baby human ended up going downwards to be more like the baby monkey. And fundamentally what we see here is how the lesser can never become the greater because they have limitations. They lack the ability. However, those who do have the ability and don't have restrictions can be dragged down. And for example, this type of experiment shows how on a small level this applies. Now, use that, apply that, say, to the world stage. Okay? But Idiocracy, the other part of it was how stupid people became the majority. But the corporations really took everything over. It's almost like that movie was saying, hey, this is what's coming. And you don't have to have any great prophetic insight to see how all these things come about. And I've even highlighted, for example, the cycles of civilization and the patterns within, and how I've made, as a descriptive, some predictions, not really predictions, just it's a word that people can relate to, of what was going to happen, when things were going to end, and what's to come next. The corporations are basically running everything, including politics, and interfering with the quality of life. While, for example, shareholders, CEOs, the people at the very top are cashing in on it. But again, majority of the people are not going to do anything about it. And that's just the way the world is. And that's why I keep saying, the best you can do is survive whatever is being imposed and whatever is going on. Survive without compromising yourself. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.
Not something that was done through quote-unquote democracy. It was not a vote that everyone had, oh, we got to respect the vote. No, it was done by the Supreme Court. Like so many other things, it was done by the Supreme Court by 9 people that nobody elected.
Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people say, when is it going to get easier? When you die.